Well, hello there. It's another day. I'm Jim Harrington.
And I am Bill Knight. Hope everything's going well for you today, sir.
It is, and I hope things are going well with you, too. You probably saw maybe the most important story out there today, which is the federal court blocking Trump's ability to impose tariffs.
The IEEPA, I believe, is what it's called. The International, or whatever it's called.
Well,
the International
that's the act.
Emergency Economic Trade.
It's the Court of International Trade in New York that imposed the block on Trump. And I don't know, Bill. I think they have gone one step too far because Trump is using tariff in his international dealings. He has a right to do that.
That court is put in place because of the IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. That was back in 1977. And their ruling is exactly wrong because that act actually does give authority to the President of the United States in an emergency, if it's declared, which he has done, to have the powers to do exactly what he's doing. Now, it doesn't give him everyday power, but it gives him during an emergency those powers, which it is. He's declared it, so he is well within his rights, and they are well out of their bounds. So what they're saying is we don't acknowledge this guy's authority.
But we do acknowledge that it's time to like and share our show. If you would do so, we would appreciate it. Yeah, I figured we'd get this out of the way so we could do some conversation. Like and share the show.
Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee.
Available at rightsideshop.com. So, Bill, this tariff situation, I think he's got to address the nation. I think Trump has got to go out in front of the public and he's got to say, look at the courts have, I think they've overstepped their boundaries in other situations since I've been in office. I mean, it's well over 100 decisions that they've interfered with our governance. And now this is the piece de resistance. This is the cap, the frosting on the cake, so to speak. By them limiting his power to impose tariffs on other nations, it cripples him. It makes him ineffective.
Well, I think that's what they want to do. And is this not the proverbial line in the sand? I remember before the election, before the first of this year, and I won't say a friend, I'll say an acquaintance that's a colleague in the industry who sadly passed away, but either way, he goes, you got to pick a side. You got to choose. You got to pick a side. And if you're not blue, you're screwed, and I'm like going, basically, he was a bigwig, but either way, that was his thing. And I don't know what got him, and I don't want to know, but
here's the thing, Bill, these judges have picked a side, and it's not our side.
Right.
They're using their robes as a weapon against us. They're not doing it for any patriotic reason. They're imposing these blockades, these roadblocks to stifle this man's presidency.
Well, the one argument I'm going to take out of anybody right now is, well, these judges, and they were, okay, let me explain something to you. They were mostly Obama and Biden appointed judges. Yeah, right. There's a couple of rogue ones in there that were, not known and put in by Trump. But the vast majority, if you sit there and say, well, there's 10 of them that did it, 9 of them are all left appointed. And they're going, the one thing about people on the left, all right, no matter what they say, they will all back it together. Republicans will sit there, on the other hand, they'll debate it. There might be a little sway here or there. Like you say, it's herding cats. Right or wrong, the Democrats are in lockstep. So when you have that going on, it's a problem.
Well,
Democrats, even though they're not the majority, have decided that, they may agree with some of Trump's agenda, but it's Trump. It's not them. So therefore, he is wrong. He no good. He bad. And they're all together on that. They're lying in the sand.
These judges, one of them was an Obama appointee, one was a Trump appointee, and one was a Reagan appointee. That means nothing, okay? I point to Amy Coney Barrett. She was a Trump appointee, and there's nobody more unreliable on the Supreme Court than Amy Coney Barrett. You know, a judge gets recommended to the president because he doesn't know these people personally. He is given a bunch of different options to choose from, and then somebody will say, well, Mr. President, I know this person, and this person is rock solid. And you look at the person making the recommendation, and you say, okay, well, I trust you. I trust you, Vice President Pence. You wouldn't stab me in the back. You wouldn't cripple this administration, so I'm going to go along with your recommendation. I'm just saying. And this is the kind of thing that happens. So when I see something like Timothy Reif, a Trump appointee, was one of the judges on the panel, that doesn't mean anything to me because he could be a plant too. You know, what it's their actions that mean something, and the fact that they have put this stumbling block in front of this man's presidency, you know. This has got to stop, folks, because if it doesn't stop, they are going to make it so that all he's doing, see, it has to stop like now. It can't wait for 6 months for a decision or a year for a decision. His presidency is running on a clock. He's not going to be up for re-election again based upon the laws and rules of our government, now, and they may change it, but right now, his time is up in 3.5 years.
If he doesn't succeed in getting his agenda done, or the lion's share of it, then it's a failure, and a failure for the Republicans, which means guess who gets to march back into the White House, and they will go lockstep together to do their agendas, right or wrong, and say, look what we've done.
Yeah, we haven't
look what they did.
We have not got an option. President Trump has got to grab hold of the reins right now, and he's got to pull back as hard as he can. And he's got to use every tool that he has to stop this. Now, he's been very, very diplomatic with these other decisions. When asked about, what do you think about this ruling? What do you think about that ruling? Well, I have great faith in the Department of Justice, and I know that we're going to appeal. He's done stuff like that. Now it's time to grab the bully pulpit, Mr. President, and say enough is enough. And you got to get a little angry and let the American people know what's going on. I mean, right now, the American people think you're okay with all this stuff. They think, oh, it's okay. The president's not getting too upset about these decisions. Mr. President, I would recommend you get out there and you let the world know you're PO'd. Enough is you've had enough of these nameless, faceless weasels who pop up out of nowhere and try to be political. And I'm sorry, folks, all this stuff is political. When they stifle the tariffs, they're not doing it for some great noble reason. They're trying to cripple the presidency. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Think what you may. Oh, no, that's not true. They're doing it because, tariffs are illegal. And no.
They've never been illegal.
Other presidents have used it. Nixon has used tariffs. Bush has used tariffs. Johnson has used tariffs. I mean, all the presidents have issued tariffs. All of a sudden, and by the way, Trump used it in his first term. All of a sudden, these no-name, no-nothing weasels, these treasonous weasels, decide they're going to throw a monkey wrench into the motor. They're going to stick a pipe into the spokes of your wheel while you're traveling down the road. You're going to stop that bike. Bingo. This has got to stop. And it has to stop not a week from now. It has to stop like now. And by the way, don't expect this do-nothing Supreme Court to be of any assistance. They are as corrupt as the lower courts. The lower courts, so help me God, friends, they are corrupt.
The question is, how do you stop it now? What do we do to stop it now?
Well, the president can come out, first of all, and he can say, based upon the executive, the way the structure of the system is, based upon the determination of the Department of Justice, the executive branch has sole authority, has exclusive powers in certain areas of governance. I mean, we're talking about certain things that the judicial system can't interfere with. One of those things, based upon the determination of our Justice Department, is the right to, under these circumstances, what you just said, Bill, after an Emergency Economic Powers Act was declared by this president, he has the authority to issue these tariffs. And no lower court can interfere. No court at all can interfere. Because, you know, this goes back to what we talked about before. Separate but equal branches. Executive, judicial, legislative. They all have their powers. But you can't start reaching over from the judicial and taking away the powers from the executive branch. And that's what's happening right now. So what would we do? If I were the president, I would say, I appreciate the decisions of the lower court, but based upon our view of the situation in the executive branch, they have overstepped, they have overreached, and we will ignore those decisions. The tariffs remain in place. That's what I would do.
Yeah, but somehow we've got to curtail the media. And when I say curtail the media, I don't mean sitting, go into propaganda mode, but they've got to get out of the opinion and the opinion mode is basically editorial. And if you do an editorial, your commentary, your view, it's open to somebody else to answer it. So we actually need to have advocates at the media. Oh, excuse me, you just said your diatribe. We need to get to say our piece, because that's not happening. The news is all slanted to the left because they are the mouthpiece.
Well, that's where in the new media, shows like this one, like ours, actually mean something. And I would recommend to my friends who do similar shows, get out there and speak let your voice be heard. Speak your piece. Let the president know he has people on his side.
Well, let me ask you a question. I talked about it a little bit. I'm going to be delicate with this. But when you watch the news, the NBCs, the ABCs, and the CBSs, and you look at the format and the presentation today, think about it when you were a kid growing up, or think about it even 15 years ago. Does it match up to that? And does it, because apparently it's a mirror, or their projected mirror of society. Is that the society you live in? Does it match it? Or is it what they want you to believe?
It's what they want you to believe. They want to create an image. They want, for example, we talked about this, you and I did before the program started, about how this society wants to emasculate men and wants to neutralize women. We mentioned this before. When I was growing up, when I was a young man, there was an organization called the National Organization of Women. Now, it was a big deal. It carried a big stick, and I didn't always like it. They were devout feminists, and they championed the women's rights as they saw them. Mm-hmm. You would think that today, in the environment we live in today, with the problems that they're having in women's sports, the National Organization for Women would be all over the news screaming about what's happening. I haven't heard a thing from the National Organization for Women. I mean, I haven't heard an iota. Nothing. Zero. They've kept their mouths shut. And we're
why?
I'll be damned. I don't know. They used to speak up about everything when I was a young man.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, a lot of the drunk driving laws now came from a women's movement, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, you know, and which was a damn good thing to happen. And the penalties are very high. Now, I think, sometimes, some of these people in power and control go, oh, we can take that and we can control people and they love it. But either way, you're doing something that can hurt others. So,
Listen,
I totally agree with
if
it.
you had told me when I was a young man that guys would be able to dress up as women and tell everybody that they feel like a woman, and that would be all they needed. As long as you feel like a woman, I guess you are. They've minimized the women in our society so much so that all a guy needs to do nowadays is say, I have repressed my female me enough. I'm actually a woman. I may have a penis. I may have to stand at a urinal, but hey, listen, I feel like a woman, and that's all that matters.
And they can get all that removed, but they go further than that.
But you don't have to, Bill. You don't have to nowadays. You just have to say you are, even if you don't have anything removed.
Look, you can identify as anything that you want to. I can identify as this camera or this microphone or, a rock over there that's being used as a paperweight. I can identify that. As a matter of fact, you don't have the right to imply or ask me how I identify. That is an insult.
The thing is, what we're dealing with here is you can't say you're a rock and compete in women's sports, but you can say you're a man, or you can't say rather you're a woman and compete in women's sports. So if your daughter has been working her tail off to be an athlete all of her life, I mean learning all the routines, and I've seen, by the way, I have two daughters. I've watched them grow up. They were out doing their gymnastics and learning to be different. They would be like, what do they call it, majorette type things. When they were younger, and they'd learn all the somersaults and all that. I mean, a lot of hard work went into it. And what they're saying now is, well, it doesn't mean much. If a guy comes along and he says, I feel like a woman, I want to do that too. Nowadays, you have to say, okay, fine. You have to, and the organizations that actually run these different meets, they are not standing up for the women. They're actually standing up for the guy who wants to compete in their sport, which is mind-boggling.
This has been going on for years, though. The women in sports, guys. Now there were women that wanted to do some of the guys' sports like football and whatnot like that, but the reason is they weren't given the opportunity to have teams and coaches and things developed for just them, and that's where we kind of created this.
Well, there's an interesting point here, Bill. The difference is back in those days when young women wanted to play like in the NFL or something like that, they weren't allowed in because everybody knew that they would be hurt.
Right.
Everybody knew that they would be physically harmed by playing in the sport. It wasn't a matter of restricting them because they were women. It was because a 300-pound man charging at you, a 120-pound woman with a more fragile frame, you're probably going to get put into a hospital or worse.
Mm-hmm. And look, guys get hit by that 350-pound guy and get hurt. You see breakage and guys, he broke. He'll never play again.
Can you imagine some 120-pound, And by the way, it's not the mentality. A lot of those women, they really love football. They love the game. They know the game as well as any guy. But it's just a physical reality that they can't play the sport with men because men are physically different. And that's the difference. The difference when you flip-flop it like they're doing now, they're saying, well, there's a difference, but the guys can play. And they're disregarding that difference. So what happens?
Guys should play against guys.
What happens is a volleyball player can be, hit in the head by a guy and put into a hospital and have permanent brain damage, which actually happened.
But what I'm saying is you can have sports like volleyball or football, but have women's teams. And really, all the women were wanting to do is be able to play the sport. They should be able to play the sport against equal, peers or, competitors out there. That doesn't mean a man. That means a woman. But, we've morphed this thing or diluted this thing into what it is now. It's
So getting back to our original topic about the tariffs, and I don't know how we tiptoed into women's sports and stuff like that, but I do think everything is kind of related in that everything is upside down. Everything right now in our society is bass-ackwards, as they would say. It's because we've turned logical decisions into the outlier, the outcast. Don't be logical about this. Base your decision on emotion and feelings. No. There are certain things that you have to decide in our society based upon logic, intelligence. You don't stick your hand into a fan that's running. That's logical. It may look like there's no fan in there, but you can see right through it. But you don't stick. You have to trust that your brain says, no, I can feel the breeze. Don't stick your hand into it. That's logical. In the world we live in today, in the society that the left is promoting right now, they would say, well, if you can see through it, man, you should be able to stick your hand right into it and, not feel anything.
just got to be fast.
Yeah. Anyway, President Trump, if you are listening or one of your aides are listening right now, it's time to grab the bull by the horns, as they would say. It's time to use that bully pulpit as you do so well. Get up there and say, enough. Enough. Here's how it's going to be. Yes, there will be people on the left who will call you a dictator, a fascist. They're doing it now. So what? You know that you're being patriotic, and all of the 77 million people who voted for you know that you're being patriotic. You have us. We're by your side. To hell with them.
See, the one thing the news does, though, and this is Thursday, so if he did do that tonight, they're not going to talk about it all Thursday. They would talk about it tonight and maybe a little bit tomorrow morning. And then when the weekend hits, they go into their recycled bit of negative news, because that's what they like to do. Trump has almost got to take the bully pulpit tonight and have something every day. If these guys want to chase stories, they got to chase his stories. They got to chase his headlines. They got to chase what he has to say. And he could be talking every day and doing things every day, and they're just ignoring him.
What you're saying is true, because when he started his presidency this time around, that was the way he did business. Initially, there was a major news item like every day.
And he's got to do it again.
The media, they couldn't sit down. They would start to sit down and something else would happen. It'd pop back up again. They didn't have a chance to follow up on stuff. What you're saying is true. He should go all weekend long with a major news item.
Flood the gate.
Yep, I agree 100%. And by the way, truly, he's got to snub his nose at these Court of International Trade judges in New York. Stay in your lane, Your Honor. You're not in your lane right now. These decisions, they shouldn't have merit. And Bill, this leads me to another thing. I saw the interview with Kash Patel on Fox yesterday. I don't know what the hell's going on with these guys. I don't know what's going on with Kash Patel. I don't know what's going on with Dan Bongino. And those two guys are different than anybody else in the business because they were outspoken critics of the FBI. They were outspoken critics of the left. They were outspoken critics of the rulings of like Jeffrey Epstein. These guys had a whole different opinion about stuff that they're now, it looks like they're covering it up. and they expect you to simply say that it was suicide. No, it was suicide.
Now, the interesting. Oh, go ahead.
And we're supposed to go, okay, well, they said it was suicide in a low, sincere voice, so the facts be damned.
Now, Bongino in his show, he was very, he had a way of saying things, and he was very into it and very
Animated, yeah.
Animated, yes. And now you're talking about like when he did the interview on that, there's nothing here, nothing to
Right.
it. Now, I've seen some other interviews with him, and his demeanor is very low profile, monotone. Yes, we're working on that. It's almost like he's in a demeanor now trying to fly below the radar, which I hope kind of that's what he's doing, flying below the radar, not to get attention drawn to him, because he's actually trying to filter into it to root out some things. Because if you sit there and be flamboyant and say, here's exactly what I'm doing right now, the Democrats are all over it. So I don't know. But, am I pleased with what I'm seeing right now? Absolutely not.
And where's Pam Bondi? I mean, all I heard in the interview with Cash were, well, we can't rush these investigations. Hey, folks, flag on the play. Nobody has rushed you with anything. Everybody out here in, the land of the living have been waiting patiently, twiddling our fingers for the Department of Justice and the FBI to do something, to maybe give us something that we suspected all along. When I hear somebody like, we played the tape on this show, Dr. Michael Baden, go step by step as to why he thought it was a murder, Jeffrey Epstein. And this is a guy he's like 90 years old and has been doing this stuff for, 75 years. And he's an expert in his field and had no horse in this race. It wasn't like he was doing it for political purposes. He investigated the situation based upon what he saw, the body, the stack of evidence, the petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, the bruising on the throat. All that stuff, he said, indicated it was a murder. But yet the FBI completely ignores it. And Bongino said, by the way, I've seen all the evidence. I've seen the file. I've seen all the evidence. That's very good, Dan. But who wrote the darn file? The FBI did, right? The organization that you criticized when you were out here with us in the land of the living. Those are the people who put it all together. Now you're surrounded by these people, and what, you believe them all now? What, because they sat you down, they have a nice title behind their name, and all of a sudden they say, well, no, we actually looked into this, and he hung himself. Really, trust us. We were there. We saw the body. There's something more going on in Washington, folks, than we're being told. Pam Bondi, everyone told us, oh, she's a pit bull. Oh, she's great. President Trump's still giving her the benefit of the doubt. I heard him yesterday saying, well, Pam is really on it and she's doing a great job. He still thinks she's doing a great job. And maybe she is, by the way. Maybe Trump knows a lot more about what's going on than we do.
Your estimation of what is going on with the big, beautiful bill going to the Senate.
Yeah.
Now, it is no secret. Number one, Elon Musk has officially stepped down from Doge. He said his time's up. He is going back. He's away from it now, and he says what they've done should work and, be here years to come and will benefit from it. He said, I'm not really sure about the big, beautiful bill. Trump answered that question and said, look, I've talked to the Senate, and I'm working with the Senate on that bill. So that means that even, these two tight buds, he didn't tell, Elon everything that he's doing. And Trump is the kind of football player that will change a play on the fly. He will do things as he needs to do. if he sees that he's running a play and it's not going to work, he's going to, you know, do some kind of shuffle.
I do see that Elon and Trump, they would like to put a wedge, the media would like to put a wedge between the two.
No, they're good friends.
They are good friends. You're right, Bill. And by the way, what people didn't realize that even in the most intimate moments in the presidency, they had differences of opinion. And Trump respected his difference of opinion, allowed him to be vocal about it, and likewise, Trump would be vocal about how he felt about things. They have respect and mutual respect. The media would like you to think there's something going on. Elon Musk has decided to leave government. No, he had to leave government.
Yeah, his gig was up.
I guess when you're a temporary government employee like he was, you can only be in for so many days. Or, it's not like you can go on forever.
Doesn't mean he can't be brought back in as a consultant. Doesn't mean that he can't be brought back in for certain projects. And, well, I'll get to it in a minute. But either way, I'm seeing here a signal that we got to take a pause. So it's time to ask you to like and share.
Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee.
Available at rightsideshop.com. We were talking about Kash Patel. One of the questions, Bill, that Brett Baer asked him was, "What do you think about how James Comey is talking about you? He's not being very nice about you. He's actually kind of saying that you're a lightweight, essentially, and not qualified for the job." Patel, he responded by saying the following.
James Comey. If he wants to come after me, no problem. I've been living rent-free in that guy's head for years, and that's just a bonus. Do you know how many copycats we've had to investigate as a result of that beachside venture from the former director?
Is that right?
Do you know how many agents I've had to take offline from chasing down child sex predators, fentanyl traffickers, terrorists? Because everywhere across this country, people are popping up on social media and think that a threat to the life of the President of the United States is a joke and they can do it because he did it. That's what I'm having to deal with every single day. And that's what I'm having to pull my agents and analysts off because he thought it was funny to go out there and make a political statement.
The 86.
Now, I want to tell you something. You heard how he delivered that line with passion, and he was charged. He really meant what he was saying about Comey and that's its statement. That's different kind of from when he was asked about Epstein or asked about some of these other investigations. His voice would go back and be more deliberate and not quite as passionate. It was like a different guy. When he was asked about Comey, it was like, oh, man, it was like somebody started the race. We're off and running,
Well, Comey is one individual. But when you're talking about Epstein, that's an octopus with a lot of tentacles. And, so you're not just dealing with one, you're dealing with a lot there. So, I'm willing to give it some time, but am I disappointed that we're not getting everything that we thought we were going to get right away? Maybe it was our fault to sit there and think, oh, it's going to be right, now, just like that. It's not. And I'm willing to give it some time. How much time? We'll see.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Here's the problem I have. It's time. I start to worry about time right about this time of the presidency because midterms will be along in about a year and a half, and there's no guarantees with midterms. I mean, I've seen it in my lifetime where everyone says, "Oh, it's going to be a runaway for the Republicans," and either they lose it or they just narrowly squeak by.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because that's where I was going with this. The fact that the midterms are coming up right now, it's going to be a Republican landslide, but as you know, anything can change. The tides can change. Perhaps if we went full tilt after the Epstein thing right now, it would hit hard, be terrible, and then time heals everything but a leaky radiator. We're not talking radiators here. People forget, and the news helps them forget. So let's say that thing blew up right before the midterms, and it's damaging to the Democrats.
Well, that is actually a very good possibility. That's something I truly haven't considered, that they may be putting that piece of explosive, news.
It's sequenced, timed and sequenced.
Put it aside, keep it, suppress it until we need it, and then we're gonna explode it to the public.
Or build the case slowly and really intricately, so that all of a sudden, oh, by the way, you wanted to know about this, boom, and it's a big boom. And oh, sorry, the midterms are next week.
Yeah, and the other thing is this: I'm not really. I don't know about you folks. They're trying to make these stories that they're investigating. Also, the pipe bomb they found next to the DNC, January 6th and 7th. They're trying to make that sound like it's a big deal. It is a big deal, but I don't think people really care about it so much. It's not like top of mind. I think what it was is, I think it was exactly what they say it was. I think it was a test. It was a test by one of the agencies, either the FBI or the Secret Service. They were testing something. I don't think it was a real bomb. I think it was a mock bomb that somebody stuck under the bench in front of the DNC. But time will tell. They were also investigating who had the white powder in the White House, who had the cocaine in the White House. Okay, I got some good guesses. Hunter Biden was staying there, so there's one, and he had a problem with that stuff. But but I'm sure there were other people in the White House, especially the Biden White House, who used it as a recreational experience. Get a little bit of that white powder and a good straw, and they were set for the afternoon. But that's not top of mind right now. The things that bother me a lot are hey, look at Epstein, as far as whether he committed suicide. We said this on the show before, Bill, whether he committed suicide or whether he was murdered. That's not the issue.
No, it's not.
I want to see who the hell was there. Give me the list of people on the island. And here's what Patel said. Well, we have to make sure that nobody's hurt by the answers. We've got to investigate and make sure we have the right people. And hey, you're the FBI. You probably can put an investigation together in about a week, if you do it right.
Look, the names are out there. But just because your name is on the list doesn't exactly imply you did something wrong. But if you were on the island and there are pictures, but then again, too, you can't imply anything. Being on the plane, being on the island doesn't exactly imply guilt. You have to have 100% proof all the way down the line.
Well, that's what they're saying. The FBI is saying we have to be 100% honest about what we're doing, and we have to be making sure that innocent people aren't damaged with the release of this information. That's why we're doing this. We're slow walking this. But people have waited a long time for the truth. And the truth, what do they say? The truth shall set you free.
Well, let me ask you a question. The truth will set you free, but who pulled the strings of Epstein?
Well, it could be, I think it was the deep state. I think the deep state used it as a weapon. Some people think it was the CIA.
It could have been, but either way, it connects somewhere to someone somehow. And these people that were trafficked, we may not want to know who did the trafficking, especially if it was the CIA, but either way, we've got to protect people. The young, innocent women that were children when they were taken and used and abused, many of them are still around today. And they're living, in seclusion with that guilt of what they were made to do.
Some of them, like that poor woman, I can't think of her name, but the one woman who they said committed suicide about a month ago in Australia, she was from Florida, but she couldn't get far enough away from the U.S. This young woman was so damaged by what happened to her that she ended up living on a ranch, I believe, that she owned in the outback in Australia.
And that tells me two things. She couldn't get far enough away. So the people that she was exposed to, very elite, important people in power, And number two, that tells me that maybe the deep state is a construct of the government, is the CIA or something close to it. But we don't know. Or maybe it's so big and bad she got as far as she could. The only next thing to do is to get off the planet.
Well, I don't think she committed suicide, to be honest with you.
I don't either.
I think that she was far enough away out in the outback where she thought she was safe, but that probably was the worst place in the world for her to be, because she could be done over, she could be taken care of in isolation.
Well, maybe her name was on a list and they knew that they could get to her and they knew that she knew something, and so they figured she's got to go.
Yeah. There is a faction in our society, a deep state, and they're not on our side, folks. They're on their side. And some of us just get in their way.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the media and how they approach President Trump, and some of them are starting to get caught up. They're starting to be shown for the lying, corrupt, miserable SOBs that they really are. Case in point is Joe Scarborough. Now, you'll remember when Joe Scarborough said this.
But comparing that guy's mental state, I've said it for years now, he's cogent. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, I don't know if people knew this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
I got to tell you, folks, this guy is either incredibly corrupt or the dumbest box of rocks I've ever seen, this Scarborough. Anyway, he was on with Mark Halperin not too long ago. And Mark Halperin challenged him, with Biden being the best he's ever seen. Listen.
Looking back at that, do you say, well, it was misleading to say best Biden ever without caveating it and say, except on the days when he's not the best Biden ever?
Well, but I never saw those days personally.
Well, you did, because you saw him address a dead congresswoman, and you saw him in South Carolina.
A dead congresswoman, yeah.
Yeah, well, more than that. I can show you. I can show you the RNC clip reels. There were plenty of days in public when he was not the best Biden ever, and of course, shortly after,
he stumbled and bumbled around. Mark, I mean, yeah, he certainly did. Donald Trump did. Other politicians did. It's actually the same case as a lot of times when I've gone in and talked to Donald Trump. I've gone to Donald Trump, and I've heard the media narrative around Donald Trump, and certainly I've been very critical of Donald Trump. And when I leave, I have a better understanding, just like Jeffrey Goldberg did a couple of weeks ago, I have a better understanding of where Donald Trump is mentally, if Donald Trump is losing it, like, people have said through the years or not. And so, again, am I going to look at a clip that's gone viral and pay more attention to that than 2.5, 3 hours I had with a guy one-on-one going around the world? No, I'm just not going to. Are some of the clips bad? Yeah, they certainly are bad. I can understand why people would see that without the context and say that there was a problem with that, especially because I said start wrong. Your tape right here, it's like, but when I look at that tape, based on what I saw with Biden, based on the time that I spent with Biden, based on the hundreds of hours that I talked to people who talked to Biden and people that worked with Biden, and were with him day in and day out. Good friends that I know that I trusted before Biden was president, that I trust now that Biden's not president. I mean, put in the proper context. I'm just not going to freak out and melt down on one or two clips here or there. And again, he bumbled around and he stumbled around, but he has for quite some time. That didn't seem to me to get in the way of Joe Biden being able to analyze the most important issues, and I certainly think he has a better grasp on it than probably the overwhelming majority of his critics, or certainly did when I spoke with him. But again, the question is, who is somebody else running the government for him? Is he incapable of running meetings? I've never talked to anybody that has said Joe Biden's not capable of running meetings. The complaint that I've heard, not only from, and I hope people are still listening to me because it is important. The only complaints I've heard about Biden internally was that he was angry. He would often get angry, and that it was basically his way or the highway. He would listen to other people, but the Afghanistan issue is a perfect example. He had everybody, from Mark Milley, every general, everybody saying, don't get out of Afghanistan. But it was, I think at times it would have been good for him to yield a little bit more to some of his advisors than he did. That's one thing. The second thing is, again, this is multi-layered. I talked to a good friend that I had in the French delegation when they had tough negotiations. I think it was right after the state dinner, the French state dinner, before the state dinner. And they said they were all surprised. They were up 5 or 6 points, and not only was Biden on top of his game, he was, they thought, a bit aggressive.
This guy, he just he's shameless. He just cannot change or vary his course when all the facts are in front of him. He made it about Trump. Trump, by the way, in one day has worked harder than Joe Biden worked in 4 years. Trump is doing press gaggles at every stop. He gets up early, he goes to bed late, and he works like a stevedore. If you don't know what that means, check your book. He's a guy who really puts his back into it. Whereas Biden would wake up, put a suit on, have breakfast, go out to the helicopter, and go on vacation. Or he'd get up, he'd say hello to everybody, go back and take a nap.
If Trump decides to go play golf, they say, he's golfing all the time. Look at all these problems here. He's going off on vacation. That's not the case with Trump, and yes, he deserves to have a break. And when he did that golf tournament that was down at Mar-a-Lago, that was something that was planned and there, and he deserved that time. But Joe would come back from vacation only to change his luggage and go back on vacation.
Exactly. Have his clothes cleaned and off he'd go again.
Yeah, I mean, he got back that morning, and that afternoon or evening, well, I'm going on vacation. It's like, what? And so who is running the place? Well, that goes back to the auto pen.
It's funny you should ask that. David Sachs was asked that question about running the place. Listen.
This is the financial system of the future, Jesse, and we have to encourage it. What the Biden administration was doing, and let's face it, it wasn't Biden. Elizabeth Warren controlled the auto pen during that administration. She, for some reason, has this pathological hatred of the crypto community. She wants to drive this community offshore. She doesn't want it happening in the United States. That's the wrong policy for the United States. We want all the innovation happening here. This is a financial system of the future. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. We want it happening here, Jesse, and I think people are thrilled that President Trump is making that possible.
Yeah, David Sachs is the newly appointed crypto and AI czar for the Trump administration. And, the way he says that, Bill, makes it sound like she actually controlled the pen for everything.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
She hated crypto, but she controlled the pen. And if that is proven, what gave her the authority?
Nothing. Nobody.
So she took it and she did it. Is that not treasonous? Does that not mean everything should be undone? Does that not mean that she should get to be handcuffed and hauled off and get her attorney and go before a judge and plead her case and then have a trial set up and maybe go to prison.
You know, it's interesting.
She,
I was watching I was reading an article about this topic, and somebody commented, some general, I don't know who the person was, someone who just felt like commenting, said, well, if the president said to his staff, look at, there's the crypto, there's the auto pen over there. If I tell you to use it, use it. If you think you have to use it, use it. If he gave a general instruction of feel free to use the auto pen when you want to, so they were just doing their job. And I was thinking, this is the kind of nonsense that they feed into social media to make the public think, well, it was kind of like generally accepted that the auto pen was there. It doesn't make it right.
Did you generally accept that it was okay? Or are they just telling you that it's okay and you need to generally accept it? There's a difference there. Think about it now before you answer that question, because the simple fact is what they did was illegal. If she was the one doing it, you might say she's a sweet little old lady now. You can't do anything harsh to her. Oh, hell yeah, you can. But this time, don't let Lizzie Borden get away with the murder of society.
My dad had a nice car. It was in the driveway, and I could drive it. And he said, yeah, you can use that car. That'll be the car you can use. But it didn't mean that I could go out whenever I wanted to without asking him and just take the car.
It's a car you can use, but you got to ask.
Yeah, that you can use it. You know how to drive it. Fine, that's great. But you still have to ask permission. I still have to know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And by the way, even if the president, in his confusion, everyone's saying now he has this confusion, he has this dementia. Whatever he said while he was in this state of dementia should be questioned anyway. If you have dementia, you can't be making coherent decisions. Oh, that's okay. Right. Use the pen. Hey, take that nuclear football. Yeah, if you want to look inside, fine, no problem. Press the buttons if you'd like. Mm-hmm. Hey, no, I think that President Trump has got to be all over this, and it's got to stop. And we have to start seeing some stuff out here in the public. The president
throw us a bone that something's going on.
Yeah, the president, Bill. Maybe he knows that a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes, but like you just said, throw us a bone. Let us know out here in the public we've got something that we can count on coming down the road.
And to reiterate what we said earlier, flood the gate with news, new news all the time, new things that the media doesn't know about. Even if you're just floating an air balloon, that's you're floating an idea, throw it out there, and then as soon as they start to dive into it, hit them with something else.
Yes.
Hit them with something else, and then hit them with a major story.
Yeah.
And then hit them with something else.
You're
just
right.
Keep it going to where they're dancing all the time, because Democrats love to dance. I know they do. You know, they're quick on their feet, so play their tune. Keep them tripped up.
President Trump issued some pardons and commutations.
But Tina, what was it? Tina Peters? She wasn't.
She was not on the list.
But you know what? I think that list was put together before all of this. Don't count her out yet, but there's got to be something deeper and more into, not on her behalf, against her. But there's more to that story than meets the eye about them actually manipulating and stealing. I know there was big news in Wisconsin that they voted that now, I guess it affects 25% of the counties. They're no longer going to do the machine. They're allowed to do the paper ballots. Well, I don't know if that's going to make a big difference there.
But, based upon the society we live in, some court somewhere will throw a monkey wrench into that. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, you can't do that. No. These machines that can be manipulated.
Yes. See, we've decided that we're going to do it our way. Hey, a reminder, folks, if you get a moment, like and share our show. We have moved to a new platform, and we've mentioned this before, but it's worth reiterating. You can't take your stats and stuff with you from one platform to the other. It's just the way it is, folks. And so it's like starting over again, building the audience. And we would really appreciate you liking the program and sharing the show, because Believe it or not, there are some people out there who've never heard of the show. Can you believe that? I can't believe that myself, but there are.
I can.
Yeah,
I know there are people out there, but you know what? We haven't gone away on the Podbean platform. We did downgrade it, but as far as all the episodes and them being there, they continue to be there, but they're not the main push. Everything now comes out of Spotify, those two platforms,
Right. So
they don't get along with each other. Let's put it that way, But, and I kind of understand why.
Like and share our show, please.
Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee.
Available at rightsideshop.com. They had an ice raid. Did you hear about this in Nantucket?
Oh, yes.
And Martha's
Maura
Vineyard
Healey
and Hyannis, too. The vacation.
Maura Healey's mad.
Oh, yeah. The governor of Massachusetts. First of all, she said ICE wasn't welcome in her state, and we're not going to cooperate with you.
Well, it's illegal for her to sit there and be a
but here's the
sanctuary
thing.
state.
She said we're not going to cooperate with ICE when they come into our state. We're not going to have our police warn ICE of certain. We're just going to not cooperate. So then ICE says, okay, fine, but we still can do it wherever and whenever we want to in this country. So they decided Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Hyannis. Big raid. Well, let me first run this little clip here from Channel 25 in Boston.
So ICE confirmed the details to us this morning in the last hour. The feds say the operations on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard ended with about 40 people being taken into custody. I want to show you now some of the pictures from the Nantucket Current right here. The Current reports federal agents started pulling people over mid-island yesterday in the morning. Here are pictures, again, provided from the Nantucket Current. The arrest took place on Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Hyannis yesterday. ICE stated in a press release that the arrests include a member of the MS-13 gang and at least one child sex offender. They say many of those arrested have criminal records. Now, the identities of those arrested have not been released. The Nantucket Police Department tells us it was notified the feds were arriving but not asked to support in the operation. The Current also reports that roads were less busy after this happened, and outside of schools during dismissal, the parking lots were less congested. One neighbor said fear kept some parents from picking up their kids at school.
Have you noticed that most of the reporters nowadays are like gender neutral? When I was a younger man, I'm just saying this as a comment. When I was a younger man, the stations would hire like a guy who would be like Hollywood leading man, good looking with, he'd look into the camera and he'd just grab hold of you, right?
Good evening. Here's tonight's news.
Now it's like it's different. Let's just leave it like no longer do we have the Clark Gables, the Gregory Pecks, the Cary Grants. We have a different approach out there, which I don't know. Probably you said it before the show started. Maybe it's some consultant out there who said this will actually work better than what you guys used to do.
They're pushing an agenda and a narrative, but when you push something, you always exaggerate and push the extreme, and that's what they're doing, and they're getting the extreme. The reason that ICE is here in Massachusetts, because I just stated I'm visiting here, I hop back and forth, but either way, is because it has been a sanctuary state, and it is infiltrated. Even Maura Healey, the governor of this state, sat there and said, well, we're looking for talent, and we can't find it basically in America, in our state or America. So we're getting people. If I elected that capital B, I would sit there and say, you won't get the vote. As a matter of fact, I will go as far away from you as I can and kick you on a life raft out in the middle of the Atlantic, and you can swim across it.
Let's stay on this topic for a second. Maura Healey, right? She tells us in advance, we're not cooperating with ICE. No, we're not going to help them at all. Our police are not going to share any information with ICE. Nothing. Then they have this raid in Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Hyannis. They scoop up these 40-plus illegal criminals. Most of them were illegal criminals. And now she says, I'm surprised I wasn't informed. I should know this stuff. I want to see what the information was that she can't have it both ways. She can't say, we're not going to cooperate, we're not going to tell you a damn thing, and then say, why didn't you tell us something? That's essentially what she's doing. Yeah, this woman is, but see, this is the left. This is the left, and this is how they think. And by the way, I'm still waiting for some of the criminals who were involved with prosecuting President Trump illegally to pay a price. That hasn't happened yet. You know, why haven't we seen some of the corrupt judges who gleefully embarrassed the former president of the United States when he was the former president, brought him in front of their courts and minimized him as best they could, and did it illegally, you know, stifled the defense that he had. Literally, they broke laws. Why haven't we seen them pay a consequence? Nothing.
Well, I would say the reason that you haven't seen that, if Trump were to do just that, he would be just trying to, you know, vindicate his name. You know, instead of getting things that he's promised to do done, and he's only got a short time to get to, you know, the finish point. You know, I mean, we got less than 4 years now. You can't get it all.
You mentioned that he pivots on the fly. Trump does, and I would suggest that now would be a time that he'd do that, because he's been very proper in the first 150 days. He's followed the rules and regulations. And the left has done nothing but kick him and kick him again. They won't give him credit for doing things right. They'll never give him credit for doing things right. So maybe what he should do now is do things that are just. Do things that are just. Do the things that your supporters will support you on, and that's important. 77 million people will support you.
Do you know Democrats are actually, I've heard in some comments when they talk about tariffs, going, well, you know, tariffs do have their purpose in place. So they acknowledge them. They just don't acknowledge and accept Trump is doing them because they didn't do it. They created this mess. They created it for a reason, and they probably want it to continue for a reason. Now, I would venture to say, you can mark my words on this, if they get in the midterms, their focus will be to impeach Trump and take him out as president. But if they have to wait until 2028 and somehow win that election, then what their next move is going to be, besides go after him, they'll go after him till the day he stops breathing. They will want to nullify his presidency to erase him from the books. Because if you go back, anything that they don't agree with or is not positive for Democrats, they'll erase from history, whatever. They will change it. Because
I've never heard a leftist give a rational reason why they thought Biden was acceptable as president. And now that all these things are being uncovered about his incompetence, his dementia, which we all saw. I mean, I saw it. You saw it. You know, we talk about him shaking hands with nobody. His, as you would call it, Harvey moment. Harvey the Invisible Rabbit. From the Jimmy Stewart movie. You know, they don't have an answer for you. The left, and by the way, don't justify what's happening at Columbia and Harvard and stuff like that. That's indefend. You can't defend that. You can't defend what's going on. If you believe that what's happening in Gaza is wrong, that's fine. There's a place and a time for you to express your opinion. But to walk onto a college campus where people are spending tens of thousands of dollars sending their kids to get an education, and to interrupt that, to screw up that system, that's not acceptable. You know, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say over 50% of the American population agree with Trump's policies.
Yeah.
Forget about the 77 million people that have voted for him.
Yeah.
50% of the population, over 50%. Yep. That's not 50%, it's 50-50.
Yeah.
It is over 50%. And whether that's 52, 53, 51, or 50.5, the majority of the population says Trump is doing the right thing. And And then you look at the 77 million, he's doing the will of the people. You talked about Harvard and their admission thing. And, everything that he's accusing them of, their president says that they are guilty of. And they don't want Jews on their campus. They don't want regular kids, your kids, my kids, on their campus. They want foreigners and certain social elite people there, so much so that over 30% of their enrollment has nothing to do with anything about America. Now, they may have been here before we were formed, but the simple fact is they are on American soil. They are technically an American college, a higher education institution. They should be sitting there. The vast majority of the students there, and those, you got 60%. No, it should be a little bit higher than that, I would say. But they're focusing somewhere else. And they get federal dollars, and then they get money from these people that come in that don't want to learn our language. They don't want to adopt our policies. They don't want to sit there. We were built on certain fundamental values, laws, religions, and that should, in any other country,
it should mean something, yeah.
Yeah, it means something. It cannot change. That's the line in the sand.
Well, here's the thing.
No, you're scribbling it away here.
Do you know how Harvard has changed? Let me give you an idea of how Harvard has changed. Back in the turn of the 20th century, it was largely Republican donors, Republican school. They were people who were from good families, the elite families, but it really was a school of higher education. But it's not that anymore. Back in the 70s, Harvard was a different type of school. It started to swing in my lifetime to the left, and it hasn't stopped swinging in that direction. And now, by the way, it thinks no matter what, it has a right to the money that President Trump is holding back from them. It thinks that it's not a matter of discretionary decision making on the part of Trump. It thinks that money is theirs no matter what, and you can't get in the way. And that's how they're approaching it, by the way. President Trump, he had this to say.
Harvard has been a disaster. They've taken $5 billion plus. $5 billion. Nobody knew that they were making this cut. If we didn't do this, we would have never found this out, Pam. They're taking $5 billion. And I'd rather see that money go to trade schools. And by the way, they're totally anti-Semitic at Harvard, as you know, and some other colleges too, in all fairness to them. And it's been exposed, very exposed. And I think they're dealing very badly. Every time they fight, they lose another $250 million. Yesterday, we found another $100 million. And they have a fund, an endowment, $52 billion. All right? They get a lot of that from the United States. And I think it's ridiculous. I think everyone's coming up to me saying, we love the idea of trade schools. With that kind of money, and money from others, but money from them, you can have the best trade schools anywhere in the world. You give them to Iowa, Indiana, lots of good states, well-run states, and you give them the money. They can only be used for trade schools, and they'll teach people how to build motors and cars and AI, the AI, we're building plants, we're building hundreds of billions of dollars worth of AI plants, already started, many of them. We've never had a boom like we're having now. You're going to see it. There's never been anything like it. So we're up to about $14 trillion in investments. There's never been anything even close. You look at Biden, this guy, they had people leaving as opposed to investing. And they're doing it because of November 5th, and they're doing it because of the tariffs. The tariffs have been tremendous. I can promise you, and I have great respect for the people at the European Union, they wouldn't be over here today negotiating if I didn't put a 50% tariff on. The sad thing is now when I make a deal with them, it's something much more reasonable. They'll say, oh, he was chicken. When
I was younger, Harvard had a large Jewish population. I'd love to know what the alumni of Harvard who are Jewish think about what's happening right now at their alma mater. You have, I would imagine, in those donors, in that endowment program they have, that $54 billion endowment, I would imagine there's a large number of Jewish alumni who are committed to that endowment program, who are thinking seriously about what they're really doing with their money.
You know, our country was founded, by immigrants that came over with trades. And trade schools is a very smart thing because that was the backbone and should still be the backbone of our country. It is what made us great, made us the technological giant that there is, because trades encompasses everything. What does Harvard do? Well, it teaches you that if you don't have a skill, well, you know how to manipulate it and control and say you're in charge and tell those tradespeople how to do their jobs, which you know not a damn thing about. But, you sit there and get to collect a lot of their money and then go, well, I'm not getting enough money, so I'm going to take your trade skills and give that contract to someone overseas because you are worthless to me. Harvard's got no place. Now, granted, there are science, medical things there that go on, but they can go on at trade schools or elsewhere, unless Harvard wants to get on page and sit there and be a real learning institution.
Yeah, they have some people now that are going into Harvard, getting to Harvard. They have no business being in Harvard. For example, I just found this out yesterday. Harvard has initiated or is initiating a remedial math program. Say what? A remedial math program. You're saying, what are you talking about? It's Harvard. No, there's actually a course at Harvard that teaches students how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now, I don't know about you, but I learned that in elementary school, like second, third grade. I was learning how to multiply.
Yes, but you know what? We didn't have a Texas International watch then that had a calculator on it. If you did, you had to put it up at the desk when you took the test. You couldn't have that. You couldn't have a calculator for any of it. You had to know how to do the math. Now you got a smartphone. How many tests have been passed with smartphones? I saw a professor arguing, well, if somebody uses AI to write something, that's an automatic out of the class, which I get that.
Yeah.
But, you can use it in business. But because, you should know how to, structure a sentence. I get that. That that is a skill you need to have to write a letter. My penmanship, as far as my cursive, is terrible, but it really should be better. But I know that.
When I was a
I can
kid,
still print. Yeah, but
there was something called the Palmer penmanship that they actually taught us. I can remember seeing the paper that we used. It was a special 2-line paper.
Yes.
That taught you how to write J's and T's and all those things. They stopped teaching that about 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, which is why I don't know it, because I'm...
But kids nowadays, you ask them to write in cursive, they don't know what the heck you're talking about. What?
No, they don't.
You can't.
But, most people can sign their name, okay?
Yeah.
How many letters of the alphabet does that really take up?
I know. Yeah, not as
So
much as
do you know all of them? You could sit there in the course of a week, go and get that paper, get a little book or look it up online. You could sit there and work on your penmanship. And in a month's time, have beautiful penmanship, and people would go, man, you got great. I wish I had that.
Yeah.
And do it. And, what skills you don't have, you could pick up.
I was seeing where they were saying that AI, some people say, oh, we got to put limitations on AI. It's going to just overwhelm us. No, that horse has left the barn. If we have rules and regulations about AI in this country, it's just going to be developed in China, Russia, Europe, and they'll be the dominant countries when it comes to AI and control it.
Where it's going to help and where it's going to hurt is when I have a website, there's 2 employees for it, and that's it. But it has to generate, half a dozen articles a day to sit there and exist. Well, that means a well thought out article means you got to sit there and get the bullet points together, and you want to do the opening line and what you want, what your sell point is, throw it into the AI. Yes, you can get an article that you got to read through probably in 30 seconds. And you've got it. You go and you do all your SEO and you get your pictures. That's great. It's fine for that. But now what it hurts is newspapers go, oh, I see that. Yeah, I don't need investigative reporters. Yeah, actually, you do, because otherwise what's happening is the AI is getting its information from the internet. And if there's no, grassroots,
if it's getting it from other AI, if AI is sussing a story out and getting a story that was written by another AI, how factual can it be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a term for that, but it's a very vulgar term, so I'll just say it's a stupid circle, and we'll leave it at that. It goes nowhere.
Yeah, but they're pushing it. They're saying that it's only going to get better and more powerful. We talked yesterday about an AI that's actually starting to think for itself, make decisions for itself. They were, I think they were surprised at the fact that this system that they were using was countermanding their rules, or it wasn't giving them the results they wanted because it didn't think it was appropriate.
Well, there's that, and it's talking to other AIs out there on the intranet. And so somebody can sit there and put some bad information out there and program that AI to look and think a different way. When other AIs go out there and search, it's getting those little bits of information. So AI can be manipulated. Don't think it can't.
It has its own language. And I can't.
Yes, it does.
I've heard the name. I've heard the name that it uses, but it is a language that's specific to AI. And when they talk to each other, they talk in this language, which is much faster, and you can't figure it. If you're listening to it, from the outside listening in, forget it. You don't know what they're saying. Anyway, Bill, I was just looking at the clock on the wall. We've done it again. Another show. In the can, man, as they would say. It's been an interesting program. A lot of things to be on the lookout for. Of course, Elon Musk is leaving Doge, going back into the private sector. He's got his hands full. That they had a partial success on that big rocket yesterday, but it wasn't the success that he was hoping for, the complete success. So I'm sure they'll be doing a lot of meetings on that and trying to figure out where to go. He's committed, though. They're committed to making that work. And I'm sure they anticipated
They're
failures.
too close for it not to, to back out of it now. It's so close. And when it's done, it's going to be a major achievement. But the thing you got to realize, they had a lot of failures when they started out. And they were sitting there producing something like, you talk about those boosters. They were producing something like 10 or 20 a day, and they still have that capability of doing that. They can make those things so quick, and they're so good, and they return on their own. They've got it so perfected. Same thing with that rocket. They've got others in the barn ready to come out and go. It's
for most of my life, Bill, the biggest rocket we had was the Saturn V rocket. It was massive.
Is bigger than that, and
over twice the size.
Yeah. And so that's got to, there's a learning curve on that. And you've got to remember, in the short amount of time that SpaceX has been around, all right, the simple fact is, it is now 90%, a little hair over 90% of all the rocket launches that go on in the world, and except for the test flights where you're going to have failures.
Yeah.
Everything has been a success. NASA can't say that, and I would say somewhere down the road they're going to have their problems too, because it happens everywhere. When you go to the airport, forget about what you've heard in the news recently about air traffic control or anything like that. The simple fact is, you get on a jet and you're flying out to Portland, Oregon for some kind of reunion or something like that. There is a chance that plane can meet its end, and since you're in it, you do too. and we talk about the tragedy of it, but then, the sheer numbers and everything, there's that acceptable loss thing. But the simple fact is, nothing is 100%.
So Elon Musk and his SpaceX program are the far and away leaders in space exploration right now. And I don't see Jeff Bezos's, his space effort.
That's a circus ride.
It's like an amusement park compared to what they're doing over at SpaceX. NASA, I don't know what's going on. You would think that they would be the leader in the vanguard, but they're not. I think you said they're kind of an also-ran now too. And then
what's the guy?
Bill, companies like, oh, you talking about Branson?
Branson, yeah.
He's
a circus ride too.
Yeah, the other thing is Boeing. You would think that Boeing would be a leader, and I think the problem that Boeing is having right now is they hired so many of these diversity, equity, and inclusion people into their company. They've watered down the great minds in that organization. I mean, for years, they were the leaders in aviation. They designed incredible airplanes. If you flew a Boeing, whatever, it was a good plane. And over the past 10 years, ever since I think it was 737 MAX, when they had the whole fleet was grounded because they put a faulty software into the system and said, "Oh, it's ready to go," and the plane would be flying along, and all of a sudden the thing would do a nosedive into the ground. So they had to ground the whole fleet of, I think it was 737 MAX airplanes. Yeah. And
there was that tragic accident I remember back in Pittsburgh.
That was back in September of 1994, where the plane.
Yeah, I remember that because that affected everybody.
Yeah, I remember.
I think the plane was out of Chicago coming to Pittsburgh.
It was, and I had clients who were actually on that plane. At the time I was I had an advertising business, and some of our clients were on that plane, and they met their demise. Good people, and you talk about, but that was when Boeing actually had a real reliable airplane. The 737 MAX problem didn't come along until like 2015, and that grounded a whole fleet of there, and that's when they started to really become unreliable. And now Boeing has got to prove themselves again.
Well, the one thing that I've noticed, a lot of these planes where they have problems, they don't have it all. If they have it immediately, it was, some laziness by somebody somewhere. But usually they go through some rigorous tests and they go, okay, she's ready. And they work for 5, 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden there's a problem. Well, you can't test and project that far forward. And my point is that we probably have to have a system of refitting, refurbishing, and renewing those planes, because we've got things flying that are 35, 40, 50 years old. Look at Air Force One and all the things about that. I can see the push to get that newer plane that's less than 10 years old and very few miles on it, because...
Yeah. And Bill, that 737 you're talking about, they have two of them on order, and the order was put in during the first Trump administration, and now they're saying it may not be ready till 2030. This is unacceptable, by the way. And Trump went to Qatar on this visit about a week and a half ago, and he got a massive order for Boeing. And Boeing, they were so happy. I'll bet you those planes will get done faster than the two Air Force One planes. I don't know what the hell the problem is. Why is there a problem?
Well, have you ever done business with the government? They may give you a good contract, but getting paid by the government because of all the bureaucracy and a Democrat or a Republican
if anybody knows how to cut the red tape, it's Boeing, and they've been making stuff for the government.
Yeah, they get
decades.
paid. They should get paid, but
yeah.
I don't know. There's a holdup there, and I really think it's something that we probably should know about, but then don't want to hear it because it's dark.
And what we should do right now is wrap this show up, because We started doing it about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, we want to remind you to like and share. We want to remind you that you can go to rightsideshop.com to get our coffee, which is Right Side Coffee. We also have Make America Percolate Again and all kinds of other good stuff. So just check it out. Just go to either itsanotherday.com, jimandbill.com, or rightsideshop.com.
Yes, and without any further ado, you can take us out of here.
I shall do that, sir. I've got, I've got the stick in my hand to get driving this plane. Driving a plane? You don't drive a plane, do you?
You fly a plane, yes.
All right, so I'm going to, pull the stick back or the yoke back as we fly into the horizon and say, hasta la vista, baby. We're out of here.
This is CRN America.